And I think also Howard just makes you so proud to be Black that you don't feel compelled to hide it no matter what space you're in. And I think I have always been like that. I don't think I ever felt shame around Blackness. If anything, I was the opposite. I was like, well, Black people, neck roll, snaps, and Z formation.
All that.
Like,
What's going on, everybody? Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Black Student Success Podcast, where we bring you insight and guidance from successful Black professionals. My name is Selvin, and of course, and as always, we appreciate the support. If you are a Black high school senior, we still have our Black Student Success Scholarship open until April 30th. So definitely check out the link in the description to apply, and then reach out to us if you have any questions. So today we have Erin Keith, who's on the show. She is a staff attorney who has about 8 years of experience within the field. She's put out a number of publications revolving around topics, such as racial injustice, as well as the juvenile system. And she has had a number of appearances on other platforms, such as Michigan Radio, as well as CNN. And she's also a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. So let's welcome Erin to the show. What's going on, Erin?
Not much. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here and talk with you about such important topics.
Perfect. So let's start off the show like we always do by allowing you to answer the question, who is Erin Keith?
So that's kind of a tough one because talking about yourself is always kind of awkward. But if I had to break it down, I would say I'm a social justice advocate. I'm a political junkie / aficionado. I am a Detroiter. I'm a writer. I'm a bison. I'm a Hoya lawyer, as they like to say. And I'm a Black woman. I think those are kind of the categories that I wear with pride. So
yeah, absolutely. So let's take it all the way to the beginning and talk about, where it all started for you, being from Detroit, what was your childhood like? What was your family makeup like? Kind of the things that formed you into the person that you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Detroit proper, 7 Mile, Better Mile. And I grew up as an only child with older parents. So that necessarily kind of made us a little posse. And I think that they raised me with a level of kind of independent thought that is characteristic of a lot of only child households. So like I was watching the news at 5, like, oh my God, what is that, Mom? What does that mean? And I don't feel like I was ever told to like be shut down. It was like information overload before social media.
Yeah.
And my dad was a journalist by trade, and my mom was a civil rights attorney and was and is an administrative law judge. And so with that being the case, I think I got kind of sandwiched between both of their passions in terms of the things that they immersed me in. And then I have a lot of other attorneys and judges in my family. So I think like I never really grew up kind of removed from this concept of like being a lawyer, being a far-fetched thing. It was kind of like, oh, if you're interested in it, you should go for it. So I think that's another thing about growing up in Detroit, right? We're known for being one of the Blackest cities in America, if not the Blackest city. And so what was unique about that experience is was that all my, doctors were Black, all my, my dentists, anything you can think of. Like I had a lot of Black teachers, I had a Black male principal. So I don't feel like I grew up really thinking that I was in any way inferior or less than because of my Blackness. And I think that in and of itself was a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, I would say like in my household, even above like law or writing or something like that, service, like public service was really emphasized at home. So caring about others, caring about Detroit, like those were priorities in my household. And I think that that's largely because of my parents' own ties to the city and them feeling very passionate about this idea that to whom much is given, much is required, right? So I don't even know that they realized that they were instilling those values in me because it was so matter of fact, like we do service. It wasn't like, oh, this is something, you should do because it's the holiday time. It was like, oh, it's Saturday, we're doing X,
Yeah.
you know? So those are, I think, things that were very important to my development as a young person.
That's what's up. And I'm sure once you gotten out to explore the world and, see what other experiences that other people had and compared to yours, you then probably gained a lot of appreciation for all those things that you were just naturally surrounded by.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I didn't realize how rare it was. Like I have family that lived in other cities, but just the fact that seeing Black professionals, like a lot of people did not grow up having that experience. And even when I went to high school, which was my like really first time going to school outside of the city limits, it was eye-opening to see their perceptions of Detroit, because it was so different from like my perception of Detroit having grown up here. Like I knew about the crime, I knew about the blight and things like that because I lived here, but I never saw those things as like determinative of like what Detroit meant. For me, Detroit was Black excellence, right? Like I had no concept for how others, like the stereotypes that others perceived about, what the city meant. So
Yeah. You didn't allow that to define you or kind of where you came from.
right.
There you go. Okay. So now let's actually jump to when you actually left Detroit for school. You went to Howard University. What was that experience like? And specifically attending an HBCU, especially with the background that you had, and maybe once you've gotten a chance to interact with folks all over the country, what was that like? And then what support did you actually get while you were on campus?
Yeah, so I am like a true HBCU advocate. My experience at Howard was profound in shaping my life. Like I could not scream about it enough in terms of how great my experience was. For me, it was just so amazing to be surrounded by intelligent, amazing, ambitious Black folks that also know how to turn up, that also know how to have a great time. But it was like, being surrounded by people who could do both, who could like have good grades, be super freaking smart, and then like turn around and be, hey, at the park. Like it was great. And especially again, coming from, so I, grew up going to very diverse schools within the city and then going to a predominantly white Catholic all-girl high school, which was still a good experience, but to some degree, like I was the only Black girl in some of my AP classes, or I felt this kind of like, I don't know, burden to be the smart Black girl. And like going to Howard was the complete opposite of that. Like it was, everyone had their hand up. Everybody wanted to answer the question. And there was none of that let's dumb it down feeling that I had in so many other spaces. It was like, whoa, let me keep up. These kids are smart, and like, wow, we're all smart and this is so cool. And I think also Howard just makes you so proud to be Black that you don't feel compelled to hide it no matter what space you're in. And I think I have always been like that. I don't think I ever felt shame around Blackness. If anything, I was the opposite. I was like, well, Black people, neck roll, snaps, and Z formation.
All that.
Like, that was always me, but it was amazing to be even more confident in knowing my history and like knowing the legacy and contributions that Black people made to so many different spaces. It just made me feel very enriched and, like I said, confident, because our history is not often taught in curriculums, right? So my parents educated me, my church educated me. I had some education, but it was nice to really learn, like every class at HBCU is, well, did you know Black people actually invented this? Or did you know that, Benjamin Mays did blah, blah, blah. It's like very much not a separate course. Of course, we had Africana studies, which I took classes there, but there was Black history in every course, right? And I think that made it so cool. And then you said supports. So I think that's a really interesting question, because Howard is, of course, you have Black teachers. There are a lot of first gen students. There's a lot of that. And you're very much encouraged to pursue things. So like being in DC, it's like an internship hub. You can pretty much intern anywhere. Sky's the limit. And we're very encouraged by our, professors and different things to do that. But in terms of supports, I would say like joining campus organizations actually provided me with the support. Of course, like I said, I had teachers who were nurturing, but what stood out to me was the quality of friends that I made, the type to be like, oh, you're rushing for an organization, girl, borrow my shoes, borrow my suit, do this. Like, it was very much like, your win is our win. And I think that is such a beautiful blessing that a lot of people who went to HBCUs probably share that same type of experience. So
nice. And I'm glad that you were able to share that. It sounds like there was a number of layers of, positive things that you got from being there. So not only being surrounded by, a bunch of Black students who are doing well and want to do well and want you to do well. Same thing with the teachers and the staff. But then once you actually found your, core things that you identified with, that you got involved with, then you found, your people, right? You found your people that are, really, really there to support you. So I am glad that you also mentioned that it wasn't like an experience where you felt like like a crabs in the bucket type of thing, where now I'm surrounded by a bunch of smart people. Now I've got to try to climb my way to the top. It's like, no, we're all trying to get there and we're all trying to help you to do that.
A perfect example, just briefly, is like, I remember sitting next to one of my first of all, we all helped each other. It was like, oh, this paper is due, girl. Oh, you're writing about this. Here's 3 links for your research. Like, it was very much like teamwork. And so I was sitting next to a good friend at Howard, and she was telling me about an internship she had that semester. I'm like, oh my God, that sounds so awesome. I didn't even know they took undergraduate interns. Like, that's so cool. And so she had started like January of that semester. She was like, well, if you want an intern, girl, I asked them if like you can just come. And literally that next week I had an internship at the same place, like that quick, because we helped each other. And I think that is so indicative of kind of the difference at being at a HBCU. It was not like this competitiveness of, yeah, girl, I finesse, da-da-da-da. It was like, oh, let me put you on right quick. And I've never forgotten that. So like, even as you climb, you see like Kamala Harris talking about her experience. Like, I'm sure there are plenty of people who enriched her experience that she hasn't forgotten along her way. And I think like, that's just so important to know, like, remember who helped you and remember kind of all the times that people looked out. I think that makes you very prone to looking out for other people or being a resource as a professional.
There you go. Appreciate that. So now let's actually take a jump into, what you're specifically working into, which is law. And, you talked about how you had a lot of inspiration or just being surrounded by family who was already in the field. But talk about, the types of, other things, if there was anything else that inspired you to study law. And then getting into the specialization, we talked to a couple of transactional lawyers on the show. You're one of the first when it comes to litigation, actually defending people. What was it like trying to navigate to find that spot in terms of the specific part of law that you wanted to study?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, of course, the lawyers in my family, like, were very important, and their example was very important. But what was most telling for me, because I kind of had 2 passions, right? Like the writing and the law. And so like what kind of made me lean one way towards another in terms of field of study was doing a summer pre-law camp while I was still in high school. It was called the Crump Law Camp. And I got to go and spend 2 weeks on Howard's campus and participate in a mock trial program. And we lived in the dorms on Howard's like undergrad campus and then took courses, in quotes, at HU Law, where like they were kind of like synthesized, appropriate for high school students, but we were learning from Black lawyers in the area, law professors who taught at Howard, and like law students also served as mentors. And I had such a wonderful experience that I think it really was like, wow, not only do I want to go to Howard University, but of course, like this is an area where I think I could excel and give back in a really positive way. And then as far as like the population I chose to serve, that's a whole different thing. So that was really more so firmed up in law school with just seeing how much injustice exists in our legal system, right? So I was a senior in college, I believe, when Zimmerman got off for killing Trayvon Martin. And then I was like a second year law student when the Black Lives Matter movement exploded. And, I was in the streets marching with my classmates for Freddie Gray and Sandra Bland and Michael Brown. And it was kind of learning how these travesties were, quote unquote, justified through the law and how the law was applied to white people to kind of extend grace versus Black people to overcriminalize and ruin their lives. That made me very outraged, like reading mock fact patterns on tests, or just the ways that, at Georgetown, I was one of a fewer number of Black students. In my 1L section, which is like the people you take all your first year courses with. So our session was like 100 people. I was one of 2 or 3 Black women in the whole class. I think there was one other Black man. So it was just a culture shock coming from Howard. I'm like, literally, where are all the Black people? Yeah. And so hearing about the ways like there were so many nuances and like analytical, well, isn't it true that more Black people are this? And like hearing how their implicit and sometimes explicit racial bias contributed to their feelings about the same cultural events and like very like crazy things that we were experiencing through Black Lives Matter just made me more sure that this particular area of the law was a place I wanted to focus. And then really like I always growing up like admired like Angela Davis and like all the people who kind of led the civil rights movement and were very integral in that way. And I always said, like, what would I have been doing, right? If that were like, if I was alive in the 70s, like what would have been my role? Where would I have fallen on that spectrum? And I realized kind of like, this was the civil rights movement of our time, abolishing this sham of a justice system to replace it with something better. Like that is really where I needed to be. And then in terms of like representing like who I actually chose to represent, which is namely like indigent Black folks, some of whom who have been system involved, some of whom who are literally like returning citizens or formerly incarcerated folks. I think that was mostly conversations with extended family members who are incarcerated, doing internships at juvenile detention facilities and with public defender offices. That really sealed the deal for me because it was just so eye-opening. Because even though I'm Black and I grew up in the city, I had a certain level of privilege that camouflaged for me just how bad this stuff really was. And I think those experiences, those firsthand, secondhand, literally like hearing people's stories or seeing the way, you know, the judges talk to these kids, just it really removed the blinders of kind of any level of belief that the justice system was designed to work for Black and brown people.
Yeah. I think one interesting that you pointed out was the culture shock that you had, you know, once you actually started to attend Georgetown. Now, do you think if you went through a law program at an HBCU, do you think you would have had, or, you know, just kind of getting into it, do you think it would have had the same impact that you felt, that you then realized how the justice system is, than if you attended, you know, a predominantly white institution?
I think because of what was literally going on historically, like what was literally happening in that moment in history, you know, that 2013 to when did I finish my LLM, 2018 time period, like there's no way I would have been sheltered from that, or there's no way I wouldn't have still had an eye-opening experience. I think it would have been a lot more different to process those moments at a Black institution, right? But to some degree, I'm glad I had to have the uncomfortable and very painful experience of processing those experiences among white people. Because it was eye-opening to me to just hear some of the things, the lack of empathy, and I don't even want to make it always intentional, but just the ignorance around some of these concepts that I needed to know how to have these conversations, because sometimes when I'm in front of a judge or talking with a prosecutor, the things that come out of their mouths just can be equally as shocking, even with being at this point practicing for 5 years. Like I can still feel myself be like, what, you honestly believe that? Or like, do you hear yourself? But it's like, I can't show that in doing my work, right? Like I have to advocate for my client. So I'm glad to have had both experiences. I, again, am a champion of HBCUs. I would go to an HBCU again tomorrow if I could, if I found another degree and somebody wanted to pay for it. But right. I just, you know, I'm glad that I was able to have both experiences. So, yeah.
I think there's a silver lining when it comes to all that, and you can find the positive and the empowerment when it comes to those uncomfortable, you know, situations that you get into. So thanks for sharing that. Now you did mention your LLM, and I did want to get into what that degree is, because, you know, the traditional sense is that when you go into law school, you're getting your JD, right? And, you know, there's this, you know, Masters of Law program that you can get into. So I know that you had more of a unique experience when it came to that degree, but can you talk about what your experience is like, and then maybe even compare it to maybe a traditional sense of going through that program?
Yeah, so a traditional LLM typically is a year-long program where you have a specialty. And so the difference between that and my program is that I did a fellowship post-graduating with my JD, which the fellowship was also at Georgetown. So for background, I was a 3L or third year law student in the juvenile justice clinic at Georgetown. And that was just, again, a very profound experience. I had done juvenile work previously through internships, but like actually that was my first time representing young people who had like an active and open charge and going through the whole process with them. So like probation violations, new offenses, all of that. And so after that program, I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do. And I ended up, I had some law firm offers. There's a lot of different ways I could have gone, but then I was presented with the opportunity to do a fellowship in the juvenile justice clinic, but as what they call law fellow. So the name of my fellowship was the Juvenile Defense and Policy Fellowship. So I would get to research, I would get to represent students and kind of like have a continuation of what I was doing. And through that program, they also offered an LLM degree in trial advocacy. And since I wasn't sure exactly what place I wanted to fall in terms of the practice of law, namely because so many of my eye-opening experiences were in my second and third year. So I'm still working at a firm and I'm like, this feels more and more uncomfortable to me at this place I am in my awakening, right? At this stage that I'm in. Yep. So I ended up taking the fellowship and, doing the coursework for the trial advocacy LLM, which that program, because it was quote unquote part-time, it took 2 full years. And so like we took courses in cross-examining and, doing an opening and closing statement and a lot of those trial skills, like those more intricate skills that you kind of only perfect by practicing, but it was still nice to have a deep dive specifically in those areas. And then we also took courses in like supervision. So a lot of people who get LLMs end up teaching, right? So we took some courses in, preparing to supervise students or be in the clinical space, but like as a professor. And so I think that that allowed me to have an immersion or deep dive into the academic workings. How does academia actually function? Like my professors are very, interesting, but how does tenure work? There are a lot of things that I kind of learned through that coursework as well. And quite frankly, an LLM is not a necessity, right? But it is a degree that if you're able to do it, especially if you're able to do it for free, I think you should go for it because it's a lot of degree that it's a law degree that many folks don't have, especially many Black folks don't have. So, yeah.
There you go. And then with it being a fellowship, was it paid for in that sense as well?
Correct. So yes, it was like embedded into our program, which I think is really unique and, allowed us to kind of get both the practical skills as well as the more analytical textbook type approach of learning about trial advocacy as well. So we were doing both. Yeah.
Okay, nice. Yeah. It's definitely great to advocate for something that one adds value to your experience. I'm sure that you took a lot of things that you put into your normal practice and it was free. You can't really beat that. So so definitely thanks for sharing that experience. Now, you've gone through in the 5 years that you've been in that active practice. You've accomplished a lot. You've kind of been able to go through all the programs. You've done all the publications. Being able to take both inspirations of law and writing and be active in that. Gotten a chance to be on CNN. It's pretty dope too. What is your definition of success? And maybe those things are embedded in what you're trying to achieve. But I think one thing that we want to highlight is that success doesn't have like a one size fit all type of look. So, what is it for you with all the things that you're doing and looking to doing?
Absolutely. So I think this question actually took me aback because I really had to sit and think about it. Right. I think success to me is liking what you do, liking yourself, and liking the person you are while doing what you do. And the reason why I say that, that last piece is I have so many friends who may, like their work, but they don't always like the person it makes them, like their inability to be present for their family members or loved ones. Their sometimes difficult work or difficult projects they have to do where their ethics or moral compass is like a little shaken. I think that what I've at least been fortunate enough to have is the privilege of really being able to do this work where morally I am in alignment. Like I'm not representing individuals who, are sometimes, I don't want to make it a negative thing, but like sometimes there's a big corporation you're forced to represent in the practice of law where you really don't agree a lot with the ethics of what they're doing without getting into the weeds. So I just feel fortunate that like I get to know my clients as people. I get to like them as people. I get to feel good about what I'm fighting for on a day in and day out basis. And that when you're practicing law is a privilege. You have to be very intentional about doing that. Yeah. And then in terms of success writ large, I think one thing I also reflected on is we live in a capitalist country, right? So especially in my profession, everyone defines success as like, I shouldn't say everyone, many folks define success as monetary achievement, right? Yeah. And I've had to really grapple with that, to reflect on the fact that so many very well compensated rich people are very, very miserable. And so many of my peers work all the time, constantly, to the point that they don't even get to enjoy the money they make. So I think it's, in terms of success, it's having the right balance between having financial security and having the ability to live your life. I think both of those matter a lot to me when I look at success, and have kind of been a guiding force, especially the work-life balance piece. Like COVID even really highlighted that. Like life is short. We do not know what is going to happen. How will you feel comfortable in 10 years given what you worked on and the amount of time you spent on it? Like, will you reflect on that and feel proud of yourself? I think that to me is success.
Nice. The balance piece, I think, is the highlight from that, lifestyle. I feel like that doesn't get talked about a lot when it comes to, career aspirations. It's, I want to do this type of work. I want to make this amount of money. And, being able to, like you said, enjoy, the fruits of your labor, and not just kind of be consumed by the work, it can get past people. And so I'm glad that you pointed out that, multifold type of definition, at least your definition when it comes to success, and then the balance that all of that kind of pulls together for you.
Yeah. And I think just to round out that point, it's so important to really evaluate for students who are matriculating, not just how much money I'm going to make, but like, what do I have to do to make that amount of money? Mm-hmm. What ethical lines might I have to cross? What, work-life balance boundaries might I have to cross? What type of family am I interested in having? At what age am I interested in pursuing some of those goals? Because if you're not intentional, some of that can fall by the wayside just because you're doing what you do. And who doesn't like to succeed on paper, right? So you might want to move up. You want to show that you're like in it to win it. You're a hard worker. All of these things, like everyone wants to be considered successful in their industry. And so I think that if you're at least intentional at the outset, you're more likely to find a profession or a field or even an area within that field that feels more in alignment with what you've prioritized. So
there you go. Yeah, definitely having purpose with everything that you do. So awesome. Now, a few more questions here. Now, if you were to go back, and it doesn't matter when this is, it could be Erin at 9, it could be Erin in high school, it could be Erin at 5 when she was watching the news. What would you go back and tell her in terms of, advice with all the experiences that you've had today?
Yeah, I think what I would most tell her is, well, two things. One, don't be so attached to the end point, like really enjoy the journey. I feel like even adult Erin needs to hear that from time to time, because I want to achieve goals. I want to, do the things I set out to do. But the purpose of life is to live it, is to journey through it. And so like, if you're so attached to the end point and checking things off your list, you can't enjoy the journey and all the intricacies that happen to make you who you are at the end point, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And then also I would say like, do what you love and nurture your hobbies. Like I had to sit back recently with COVID and be like, wow, what are my hobbies? Like, what are things that I don't monetize that I just enjoy doing? Because even with writing, like the pressure to submit things or get things published can sometimes take away from the day-to-day enjoyment of the art of writing. And so like finding some hobbies that you hold close to your heart, not to say you never pursue them in a more professional way, but just that knowing that they're your hobbies, these are your outlets, and that is a big deal to have those, especially as you go from childhood into adulthood. And then like the do what you love piece is so important, because I think that if I could do it all over again, I definitely still would have pursued this profession, but I think I would have been more intentional about like truly pursuing both. So I think like I got to this point in adulthood and it's like, wow, I really still love writing. Like, let me do this too. But I think I would have like maybe double majored or something. I literally could have done both and had like a quote unquote educational background in both.
There you go. There you go. Awesome. Great advice for yourself. So now before we wrap things up, I do have a few fun questions for you, just so I allow the listeners to learn a little bit more about you. So let's start here. So if you could take the food, weather, and attractions from any three places and create your own, customized vacation spot, what would those three things be?
Now, this is really hard because like that's combining a lot of things. So I would say the food of Jamaica, because I love Jamaican food. The weather of, well, I would say the weather of Jamaica too. It's beautiful there. I don't know. Maybe the weather of South Africa. Because when I went there, it was amazing and beautiful. And then attractions, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to say the attractions of South Africa, but also Amsterdam, because the aesthetic of Amsterdam is one of the most like beautiful places I've ever been. Like all the I don't know what they're called, canals and different things. And in South Africa, you have like skyscrapers next to mountains, next to the ocean. It was just like mind blown that this place could even exist on our planet. So that would be my answer.
There you go. All right. So now, take out COVID. We're at the, everybody's at the cookout. What are you most likely doing there?
Well, I think it would have to be a tie between making cocktails for my friends, because I am like a very novice bartender. Like I really enjoy coming up with creations and be like, taste this. And then also, shamefully, I'd probably be complaining yet again that I don't know how to play spades. Like I've been taught, I've been people's partners, and I wasn't a complete embarrassment. But every time I sit down, they're like, "You want to play?" I'm like, "No," because y'all take this way too seriously. And I don't feel that firm in my abilities. Like I know what books are, but like I don't know how many I got. If that.
Exactly. It's funny. There's more people that are in that boat than you would actually think. I feel like once you get to an age, learning how to play spades well, you're just kind of like, nah, we're way past that point. So
I'm bringing the drinks to this.
There you go. Exactly. That's how you serve. There you go. Yeah. Favorite fictional attorney?
So I have to go with my girl, Olivia Pope. Like I remember when Scandal came out and I was in college, and I'm literally like walking around like, Gladiator in a suit. Like, yes, it's her. I never even, shamefully, I never finished Scandal, but so I don't know how things wrapped up, but for the seasons I watched, my favorite. Yes.
There you go. All right. Top 3 memes of all time, or even just the favorite ones right now.
So, okay, I love my Kermit the Frog sipping tea meme, because I think that is so often me in situations. Like, I'm going to just sip this tea. I'm going to say my little 2 cents and just walk away.
You're right.
And then, of course, like the Michael Jordan crying meme, because it just is so applicable. Like, I love the fact that, like, you can, like, superimpose his face on a situation. You're just like, yeah, this is about how I feel. Like these new variants, Michael Jackson, Lord. Michael Jackson crying. Like that's how I feel about COVID as a whole. So
Absolutely. All right. And then one more.
Yeah. Maybe I don't know how I describe this meme, but it's the girl blends her hair in like a ponytail. She's like going like this.
Yeah.
That's hard to describe for a podcast. Sorry, y'all who are listening.
Yeah. They'll know. They'll know.
Kind of holding her hand out in a pinched position with this face of just befuddlement. And that is also, again, how I feel sometimes.
Yeah, there you go. Three classic ones. And then finally, out of these 4 foods, which one could you give up for life? And you've got potatoes, bread, rice, and pasta.
This was a no-brainer for me. No-brainer. It's rice. I do not have to have rice. And here's why, right? Potatoes. Pretty much all Jamaican food, I could maybe do without the rice and peas, but like my roti, my jerk chicken, if I had some potatoes under that would still be fire, right? Then bread. I love bread. They're spread across different cultural foods that like I cannot imagine eating any of food with no naan. Like I can't do it. And then pasta is just like so great. Like I love pasta. Rice, I could do cauliflower rice, right? Like I don't feel like I need to claim rice with my spirit. I could not imagine not eating macaroni and cheese with real macaroni. Like what would I be doing? So that may be stereotypical, but rice could go away.
Rice could go away. So coming from a Jamaican household, rice was like, no, that has to stay. That has to stay. So there you go. I appreciate that. Well, Erin, that's all I got for you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your knowledge. This is definitely a great conversation that we had. I'm going to give you an opportunity to promote anything that you want. If anybody wanted to reach you, if they had any questions about anything that you talked about, I'm going to give you the floor for that.
Yeah. So, anybody who wants to reach out, I'm pretty much an open book as far as like resources or wanting to know more about just like the journey of becoming a public interest attorney, a social justice advocate. You can hit me up on my social media at Erin Keith. So THE, Erin, ERIN, Keith is my last name, KEITH. And yeah, any questions you have, I'm happy to answer.
All right. Perfect. Well, thank you for your time. And then thanks everybody for watching, listening, however you're consuming this. Please be sure to follow us on social media. We're at InQuire Hire, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Check out inquirehire.com. We got a lot of great information there. And until next time, peace.
Peace.